In 1967, the students of the Royal Polytechnic Institute, now known as the University of Westminster, were caught up in one of the most bizarrely inappropriate pranks in college history. The prank? They invited a 60-year-old guy over for a debate at their student union. But after the debate, 6 of the students kidnapped the poor old man and locked him in a cold, dark basement, all alone. But what happened next could never have happened in their wildest dreams. The old man not only got out of that locked basement, but ended up locking them inside as well. This was Alfred George Hinds, Britain's most celebrated prison break artist, who, while serving a 12-year prison sentence for robbery, successfully broke out of 3 high-security prisons. But how did he end up in those prisons one by one? For this, we have to go back in history. When Hinds was 7, his father got arrested for armed robbery, and his punishment was 10 lashes. Not being able to sustain his injuries, his father died, and Hinds was sent to an orphanage. And from there, his road to criminality began, which would end with him suing the authorities and winning his freedom. But we'll get back to that later. Hinds bolted out of that orphanage soon after. Now imagine a 7-year-old kid in the big city who has to make a living. So naturally, Alfred turned to crime. As a teen, he was arrested for petty theft and sent to a borstal, a kind of young offenders prison. The borstal system, which was meant to be educational, was just a small prison. But for Alfred Hinds, it was only a temporary layover. He escaped. Little did he know he was heading towards life, from which he will have to escape several times, earning him the title Houdini Hinds. Hinds later joined the British Army during World War II, but he quickly ran away from armed forces. Perhaps this was his last chance for a normal life. In his mind, leaving the army was his best choice. But this was only the beginning. In 1953, Hinds allegedly staged a massive jewelry robbery that netted him a small fortune, $90,000 of which was never recovered by the authorities. And to everyone's surprise, he pleaded not guilty. Nevertheless, the prosecutors convicted him of the crime, and he was sentenced to 12 years imprisonment. Hinds had escaped an orphanage, escaped kids' prison, and escaped the British Army. He wasn't about to rot away 10 important years of his adulthood for a crime he claimed to have never committed. Hinds was locked up in Nottingham prison. All he could do was to fight for his innocence while remaining behind the bars, and he had enough. So he decided it was time to leave. He studied the guards' routine and quickly realized that during the night, there were very few guards on duty, roughly 2 per 1,000 prisoners. Hinds made his move. The next morning, his cell was found empty and he was gone. The only problem? There were no signs of forced exits, no bent bars, no secret tunnels, no holes, no broken windows, nothing. The prison cell was clean, and there were no signs of his escape. It was only later the authorities realized his clever plan. But by then, Houdini Hinds was working as a builder-decorator in Ireland and throughout Europe. So, how did he do it? Well, what do you think? He actually made his own key and unlocked his prison cell door. In those days, prisons never had toilets in any of the prison cells. Whenever they had to use the bathroom, they simply used an aluminum pot, also called as the chamber pot, placed somewhere in their cell. Hinds was one of the very first prisoners crowned to have taken advantage of the soft metal handle, which he had removed from his pot. You see, Hinds was a craftsman blessed with a photographic memory. He memorized the patterns of the key, which he had seen in the hands of one of the guards, then simply molded the handle into a key. When the night of the escape arrived, he simply unlocked his prison cell door and walked out. He wasn't out of the prison yet, because there were more locked doors. But weirdly enough, the other doors in the prison had the same locks fitted, so he had a free route of escape. But there was one last hurdle, the 20-feet-high wall of Nottingham Prison. According to the authorities, the manner of getting over the prison wall was even easier for him. He simply used several very weak threads. He attached a chair leg to all the threads and rotated them until they formed into a rope. At the end of the now cord-like strands, he fastened individual bricks and threw each one, separately, over the wall. When he had thrown sufficient weight and bricks over the wall, he completed rotating the fibers, causing all the individual strands to become one thicker rope. So he scaled the wall, took all the evidence of escape with him, and got away in a truck provided by a friend. It was because of this escape he earned the name Houdini Hinds. After his unbelievable escape, Hinds escaped to Dublin, and there he worked on and off as a builder and decorator. He was trying to get some attention to his case by sending letters and recordings to the media, proving his innocence in the jewelry robbery case, and as a result, he gathered some public sympathy. He was free, but his escape was an insulting wound to the authorities, and soon Scotland Yard caught up with him in 1956. And once again, after 8 months of freedom, Hinds was back in the slammer. Only this time, he was in a pretty bad situation. Because he had previously slapped the authorities, they weren't going to be kind to him. At this point, he had realized that when he got locked up again, the authorities will make sure that he'd be locked up for a very long time and an escape would be impossible. Desperate and enraged, Hinds sued the cops. Regardless of the fact that he had a case or not, he sued for illegal arrest and hence he was legally entitled to a trial. During his trial at the law court, he requested to use the toilet. With 2 guards escorting him, permission was granted. After a few minutes, the authorities heard some shouting from the toilet. When they reached the crime scene, they couldn't believe their eyes. All they found were 2 guards who escorted him, beaten and locked up inside the toilet with the help of a padlock. Authorities were perplexed. How on earth Hinds had a padlock at his disposal? Well, he was one step ahead from the very beginning. Hinds knew that this time he will be sent to a maximum security prison, a prison that he might not be able to escape from. So he created a distraction by suing the authorities and formulated his brilliant plan. But for this, he needed help from a few friends. For starters, he needed someone to smuggle the padlock to him while he was at the courthouse. This was done with the aid of an unnamed fellow inmate who also happened to be a skilled locksmith. As soon as the 2 escorting guards uncuffed him, he wrestled both with the help of the same friend, who smuggled the padlock and successfully locking both guards inside the toilet. After that, he sauntered out of the London's courthouse building into the Fleet Street, thus blending in with the crowd. On June 24, 1957, Hinds was a free man again. But his borrowed freedom only lasted about 5 hours. Because while attempting to flee to Dublin, he went to the Bristol airport and, to everyone's surprise, he was once again incarcerated. Despite his regular claims of innocence, he was sent to Chelmsford Prison to ensure he won't be able to escape. Chelmsford was notorious for being the only prison no one has ever escaped from at that time. But that was about to change. At Chelmsford, Hinds became friends with Georgie Walkington, a fellow inmate, in a quest for his next grand escape. On Sunday, June 1, 1958, while many prisoners at church, Walkington was supposedly cleaning his cell. He went down to the ground floor landing for a bucket of water, but he intended to slip into a linen store and go to a hatchway so that he could enter the bathhouse. There was another inmate in the linen store who used it as a club room for himself and his friends to have a brew-up. Walkington has a key for the double door at the end of the passageway, so he persuaded that inmate to let him go through that door, which led to the prison yard. He also had a key to the gate that separated the yard from the compound. On the other hand, the security on Hinds was pretty tight. As an escape risk, he was not allowed to go anywhere without one guard. But sometimes they were lazy. He asked to go down a level to get water, but the guard was reluctant to go with him, asking Hinds to tell the warder below to shout up when he had arrived. Hinds had arranged for a friend to do the honors while he went immediately to the linen store. Hinds met Walkington at the discussed spot, and both of them set off for the gates. To their surprising horror, the key didn't fit, but Hinds wasn't going to give up just yet. He quickly devised a plan of placing 2 wheelbarrows, used for carrying coal, placed them against the wall, balancing one on top of the other. He then climbed up with the help of his denim jacket hooked on the barbed wire to haul them up. At this point, Hinds fell. His glasses broke. But eventually, they were able to haul each other to the top. Before jumping directly from the 25 feet high wall, they worked their way along the top. In the process, Hinds hurt his leg. They slowly worked their way through the graveyard to the Morris Minor, a car placed there with the help of a friend. Despite his injured leg, Hinds took the wheels and they both drove off. Walkington was recaptured after some time when he returned to his former haunts in London. Hinds returned to Dublin, where he started working as a used car dealer under a fake name. He was caught again after 20 months when he was trying to smuggle some cars from the Republic to Belfast. This was the beginning of his long battle with the authorities, during which he taught himself law. He was so good and was equally self-trained as some of the best lawyers in Britain. Using his legal knowledge, Hinds finally won the case and was deemed innocent by the Home Secretary. He later became a businessman and moved to Jersey, where he joined the local branch of high IQ society Mensa. The Hinds case teaches us a close understanding of the legal system and perhaps a few flaws. Either he was innocent or he manipulated the legal system to his desires. But in both cases, it forced the country's penitentiary and legal system to be better than before. What do you think about Alfred George Hinds? Let us know in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, please remember to click the like, subscribe, and notification bell to stay tuned for the next visual story.